Welcome back to Apex Truth. Today, we leave the scorching plains of India and ascend into the shadows of the Himalayas. We are going to the district of Chamoli in Uttarakhand, the land of the gods, home to the sacred temples of Badrinath and Kedarnath. It is a place of breathtaking beauty, where pilgrims go to find peace. But in the winter of 1968, peace was the last thing found in these valleys. While the world knows of the man-eating leopards of this region, the locals whisper about a different kind of terror. They didn't call it an animal. They called it the Kayalabhut, the black ghost. It was a massive sloth bear, driven down from the high altitudes by a harsh winter, starving and unnaturally aggressive. Usually, Himalayan black bears or sloth bears avoid humans. But the Chamoli bear was different. It didn't fear the village fires. It didn't fear the shouting of men. It seemed to thrive on the terror it created. The story begins in a tiny hamlet perched on a steep ridge overlooking the Alaknanda River. The mist here is so thick you can't see your own hand in front of your face. It was in this blinding white fog that a shepherd named Bishan disappeared. He had gone out to check on his flock. The sheep returned, bleating in terror, but Bishan did not. When the villagers went to look for him, they didn't find a body. They found only his woolen cap and a trail of blood leading off the edge of a sheer cliff. But it was the sound that haunted them. From the darkness of the ravine below, they heard a strange, rhythmic wailing. It wasn't the wind. It was the sound of a beast vocalizing in the darkest sound of pure, possessive rage. The black ghost of Chamoli had claimed its first victim, and the mountains were no longer safe. The next morning, a search party of 5 brave men, armed with axes and old muzzle loaders, descended into the ravine. The mist had not lifted. It clung to the valley floor like a suffocating white blanket, dampening every sound. The only noise was the roar of the Alaknanda River far below and the crunch of their boots on the frost-covered rocks. They found Bishan 200 feet down. He was caught in a tangle of wild rhododendron bushes. The sight that awaited them was enough to make the strongest man among them vomit. Bishan had not been eaten. He had been erased. The bear had used its long, curved claws to strip the flesh from his skull. It was a kill of pure aggression, not hunger. But the horror wasn't just in the sight of the body, it was in the realization of where they were. They were standing in a narrow gorge, with steep rock walls rising on both sides. A perfect trap. As they hurriedly tied Bishan's broken body to a bamboo stretcher, one of the men, an elder named Govind, froze. He held up a hand, signaling for absolute silence. "Listen," he whispered. The men strained their ears against the roar of the river. At first, nothing. Then, they heard it. Huff. 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 It was a heavy, rhythmic breathing. It sounded wet and congested. And it wasn't coming from the river. It was coming from the shadows of a small cave, barely 30 feet above their heads on the cliff face. The black ghost hadn't fled after the kill. It hadn't returned to the high forests. It was sitting there, shrouded in the darkness of the cave, watching them retrieve its trophy. It was guarding the body. Panic seized the group. "Move. Now." Govind hissed. They scrambled up the steep slope, slipping on the black ice, dragging the heavy stretcher. They expected a roar. They expected a charge. But the bear didn't attack. It just kept breathing, that loud, mechanical huffing sound echoing off the canyon walls. It was letting them go. Or so they thought. They didn't realize that by entering the ravine, they had marked themselves. The bear now knew their scent, and it knew where they lived. That night, a heavy silence fell over the village. The funeral pyre for Bishan had been lit, the smoke mixing with the incoming snowstorm. The villagers barred their heavy wooden doors and shuttered their windows. They huddled around their hearths, praying that the snow would cover their tracks and the beast would stay in the ravine. But the black ghost did not stay in the ravine. Around midnight, the wind began to howl, rattling the slate roofs of the stone huts. Govind, the elder who had led the search party, lay awake in his cot. He couldn't sleep. The sound of that heavy breathing in the cave was still echoing in his mind. Then, he heard it. Not the wind. Not the snow. Scritch. Scritch. Crack. It was coming from the back wall of his hut, a wall made of mud and loose stones. Govind sat up, his heart pounding. Sloth bears are nature's excavators. They have claws designed to rip apart concrete hard termite mounds. A mud wall was nothing to them. Scrape. Thud. Scrape. Thud. The sound was rhythmic, relentless. The beast was digging. It wasn't trying to find a way in, it was making a way in. Govind grabbed his old muzzle loader from the wall, his hands shaking as he poured the gunpowder. He shouted to his wife to hide in the loft. "Who is there?" he screamed, hoping it was a thief, a man, anything but it. The only answer was a low, deep snort right against the wall. Snort whoosh. The smell hit him through the cracks, the stench of wet, rotting wool and musk. It was him. Suddenly, a chunk of dried mud the size of a dinner plate crumbled inward and fell onto the floor. Through the small hole, a black snout pushed through, sniffing violently. Then came the claws. 3 inches long, ivory white, hooking into the gap to tear the wall down. The horror was absolute. The creature wasn't attacking the door, it was coming through the wall of his bedroom. Govind raised the rifle, aiming at the hole where the black nose was twitching. He knew he had one shot. If he missed, the wall would come down, and the devil would be in the room. Bang! The explosion of the gun in the small room was deafening. Smoke filled the air. Outside, a terrible, high-pitched scream rose above the wind. It sounded like a woman shrieking in agony, the unique, terrifying cry of a wounded sloth bear. Then, heavy footsteps pounded away into the snow. Thump thump thump. Govind lowered the gun, gasping for air. He thought he had won. He thought he had driven it away. But he was wrong. The bear hadn't fled in fear. It had fled in rage. And now, it wasn't just hungry. It was vengeful. The siege of Chamoli had officially begun. The shot fired by Govind had hit its mark, but it hadn't killed the devil. The next morning, the villagers found a trail of bright red blood in the snow, leading back into the dense oak forest. A normal animal, wounded and in pain, would retreat deep into the wilderness to heal or die. But the Chamoli bear was not a normal animal. It was a creature of spite. For 3 days, the village of Dungri was entombed in silence. A blizzard had set in, turning the world into a blinding white void. Visibility was less than 5 feet. No one dared to leave their homes. The livestock was brought inside the living quarters. The people huddled in the dark, listening to the wind, terrified that every scratch on the roof was the black ghost returning. But the bear didn't attack the houses again. It did something far more sinister. It laid a siege. It understood that the humans were hiding. It understood that they were trapped. So, it waited. It patrolled the single narrow path that connected the village to the outside world. It was cutting off their lifeline. On the 4th morning, the snow stopped, but the fog remained thick. Supplies were running low. The village headmen decided that they could not wait to be slaughtered in their beds. They needed help from the forest rangers in the valley below. 3 young men, Vikram, Kundan, and Furious Govind, who wanted to finish what he started, volunteered to make the trek down the mountain. They armed themselves with axes and the single muzzle loader. They moved in a tight formation, back to back, eyes scanning the gray mist. They had walked about 2 miles into the forest when Vikram stopped. He pointed to the snow at their feet. "Look," he whispered, his face pale. There were footprints. Massive, inward-turning prints with long claw marks. But they weren't leading away from the village. They were fresh. And they were walking in the same circle as the men. The bear wasn't ahead of them. It wasn't behind them. It was stalking them parallel to the path, hidden behind the curtain of fog. It knows we are here, Govind hissed, raising his gun. Keep moving. Do not run. They walked faster, their hearts hammering against their ribs. The forest was dead silent. No birds. No monkeys. Just the crunch of snow. Then, a sound broke the stillness. Snap. It came from directly above them. Sloth bears are clumsy-looking, shaggy creatures, but they are master climbers. Before the men could look up, a dark mass detached itself from the thick branches of an oak tree. It didn't roar. It dropped like a stone. The black ghost landed directly on Kundan, the man in the middle. The force of the impact drove him face first into the snow with a sickening crunch. There was no time to scream. The bear was on him instantly, a blur of black fur and white teeth. Govind spun around, the gun at his shoulder, but he couldn't fire. The bear and the man were a tangled knot of limbs in the snow. If he shot, he would kill Kundan. Hit it. Hit it with the axe. Govind screamed at Vikram. Vikram lunged forward, swinging his axe with all his might. The blade struck the bear's shoulder with a dull thud. The bear didn't even flinch. It simply turned its head, its eyes burning with that familiar red madness. It swiped a massive paw at Vikram, sending him flying into a tree trunk, unconscious. Then, the bear did something that froze Govind's blood. It stopped mauling Kundan. It stood up on its hind legs, towering over the fallen man, and looked directly at Govind. It huffed a loud, congested spray of breath. It was challenging him. Shoot me, it seemed to say. Shoot me and see what happens. Govind's finger tightened on the trigger, but his hands were shaking so violently he couldn't aim. The fog swirled around the beast, making it look like a demon composed of smoke and shadow. And then, with a speed that defied logic, it dropped to all fours, grabbed Kundan by the collar of his coat, and dragged him into the mist. Govind was left alone in the whiteout, the screams of his friend fading into the ravine, followed by the terrifying sound of the bear's victory vocalization, a high-pitched, chattering laugh. The black ghost had taken another soul, and the path to safety was now closed. Govind managed to drag the unconscious Vikram back to the village, leaving a trail of blood in the snow that froze almost instantly. The village of Dungri was now a prison. The black ghost had effectively blocked the only exit. Kundan was gone, his body lost to the white void of the ravine. 2 days later, the weather cleared just enough for a heliograph signal, using mirrors, to be flashed to the police station in the valley below. The response was swift. They didn't send a platoon of policemen this time. They sent one man. His name was Arjun Rana. Rana was a Pahadi, a man of the mountains. He wasn't a trophy hunter looking for a rug for his living room. He was a government-sanctioned exterminator. He had tracked snow leopards in Ladakh and man-eating tigers in the Tarai. But when he arrived in Dungri, shivering in his heavy woolen coat, carrying a scope .375 Magnum, he looked grim. He examined the hole in Govind's wall. He looked at the claw marks on the trees. He didn't say a word for hours. Finally, he turned to the terrified villagers huddled in the headman's house. "This is not a bear," Rana said quietly. "A bear fights with its paws. This thing fights with its mind." Rana realized that hunting this beast in the dense forest was suicide. The bear had the advantage of cover, smell, and knowledge of the terrain. To kill it, Rana had to draw it out into the open. He had to make the bear believe it was the one hunting him. He chose the site carefully, a narrow ridge called Bravest Drop. On one side was a sheer cliff dropping 500 feet into the Alkananda River. On the other, the dense black forest. The path along the ridge was only 4 feet wide. If the bear wanted to cross from the north forest to the south, it had to use this ridge. Rana didn't build a platform. He didn't hide in a tree. He sat right in the middle of the path, on a small rock, fully exposed. He placed a small kerosene lamp behind a rock to keep the frost off his rifle scope, but otherwise, he sat in darkness. He was the bait. The sun dipped below the peaks, painting the snow in shades of blood orange and then bruised purple. The temperature plummeted to -10 degrees. Rana sat motionless, a statue of patience. Hours passed. The wind howled, sounding like distant screams. Then, at 2 a.m., the wind died. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the predator's silence when the jungle holds its breath because the king is walking. Rana gripped his rifle. He didn't hear footsteps. He didn't hear breathing. What he heard was a sound that made no sense. Tap. 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 It sounded like a stone being tapped against a rock. It was coming from the cliff edge, the side with the 500-foot drop. Rana slowly turned his head. It was impossible. No animal could climb that sheer face of ice and granite. The sound continued. Tap. Tap. It was a distraction. Rana's instinct screamed at him. Don't look at the cliff. Look at the forest. He spun around, swinging his rifle toward the dark tree line. He was just in time. The black ghost wasn't walking. It was sliding on its belly across the snow, silent as a shadow, barely 10 yards away. It had been crawling toward him while he was distracted by the sound on the cliff. The moment the rifle barrel swung toward it, the bear abandoned its stealth. It exploded from the snow, rising to its full height of 6 feet, a towering wall of shaggy black fur against the starlight. It didn't roar. It hissed a sound like high-pressure steam escaping a valve. Rana had a fraction of a second. He aimed for the white crescent on the chest, the moon mark. He pulled the trigger. Click. The cold had frozen the firing pin. The rifle was useless. And the black ghost was airborne, launching itself at the only thing standing between it and total dominion over the mountain. The sound of the firing pin clicking on the frozen primer was the loudest silence Arjun Rana had ever heard. It was the sound of death. There was no time to work the bolt. There was no time to scream. The black ghost hit him with the force of a runaway truck. The impact lifted Rana off his feet and slammed him onto the frozen hard pack of the ridge. The rifle flew from his hands, skittering away into the darkness. Rana didn't just fall, he was crushed. 600 pounds of muscle and fur pinned him to the ground. The smell hit him instantly, a suffocating stench of old blood and rotten meat. The bear didn't go for his throat, it went for his face. This is the signature of the sloth bear, to erase the identity of its victim. Rana threw his left arm up instinctively. Crunch. The bear's jaws clamped down on his forearm. The thick woolen coat saved his arm from being severed, but the pressure was bone-breaking. Rana screamed, a raw, primal sound that was swallowed by the vast emptiness of the Himalayas. The bear shook its head violently, ragdolling Rana on the ground. Its long, sickle-shaped claws dug into his thigh, shredding the heavy trousers and slicing into the muscle. The pain was blinding white heat. But Arjun Rana was a Pahadi. And a Pahadi never walks into the woods without his steel. With his left arm trapped in the grinding jaws of the beast, his right hand clawed at his belt. His fingers found the cold, wooden handle of his kukri, the heavy, curved Gurkha blade. He drew it with a desperate roar. He didn't aim. He couldn't see through the spray of saliva and snow. He just swung. Thwack. The heavy blade buried itself deep into the bear's massive shoulder, hitting bone. The bear roared a sound that vibrated through Rana's entire body and released his arm. It reared back, blood pouring from the wound, staining the snow black in the moonlight. Rana scrambled backward, gasping, his left arm useless, his right hand gripping the bloody kukri. "Come on," he screamed, his voice breaking. "Come on, you devil." The bear didn't retreat. The pain seemed to fuel it. It dropped to all fours, its eyes fixed on Rana. But in the chaos of the struggle, they had moved. They were no longer in the middle of the path. They were on the edge. Behind Rana was the solid rock of the mountain. Behind the bear was the 500-foot drop into the Alkananda Gorge. The bear charged again. Rana knew he couldn't stop the weight. If he stood his ground, he would be mauled. If he ran, he would be caught. He did the only thing left. He gambled his life. As the bear lunged, Rana didn't strike. He dropped flat onto his back. The bear, expecting resistance, lunged into empty air where Rana's chest had been a second before. Its momentum carried it forward, over Rana's body. Rana kicked upward with both legs, driving his boots into the bear's soft belly. It was a move born of desperation. The bear's claws scrabbled frantically on the ice for a grip that wasn't there. It slid past him. For 1 second, time stood still. The bear's hind legs went over the edge. Then its torso. It let out a final, confused huff. But as it fell, one massive paw lashed out blindly. The curved claws hooked onto Rana's boot. Rana was jerked forward. He clawed at the ice, his fingernails tearing off, but the weight was too much. The black ghost was falling into the abyss, and it was taking him with it. He slid toward the edge, the black emptiness opening up to swallow them both. Arjun Rana felt the ice scraping against his chest as he was dragged inch by inch toward the drop. The weight of the falling monster was immense, an anchor of fur and bone pulling him into the void. His legs dangled over the precipice. He could hear the wind whistling up from the gorge. He had 1 second before gravity claimed him. He couldn't pull his leg free. The claws were hooked deep into the thick leather of his climbing boot. He still held the kukri in his right hand. With a scream of pure adrenaline, he didn't strike at the bear, he struck at his own foot. Thwack! The heavy blade sliced through the laces and the thick leather tongue of the boot. Thwack! He struck again, frantic, desperate. The leather snapped. Rana kicked his leg violently. With a sudden, sickening jolt, his foot slid out of the boot. The boot, still hooked by the bear, disappeared into the darkness. The weight vanished. Rana clawed at the ice, hauling his torso back onto the solid rock of the ridge. He lay there, gasping, his heart hammering against the frozen ground, listening. He waited for the sound of the impact. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. Crack. A dull, wet sound echoed up from the riverbed far below. Then, silence. The Alkananda River swallowed the noise, rushing on as it had for 1,000 years. Rana didn't stand up. He couldn't. His left arm was a ruin, his thigh was shredded, and he was missing a boot in sub-zero temperatures. He crawled. He crawled on his belly like a wounded animal, dragging himself mile after agonizing mile back to the village of Dungri. When the villagers found him at dawn, collapsed near the perimeter, he was half frozen and delirious. He didn't speak of the fight. He only pointed toward the cliff and whispered, "It is done." 2 days later, a retrieval team went down to the riverbed. They found the black ghost. The fall had shattered its spine. It lay twisted among the white river rocks, looking small and broken. But even in death, the creature commanded fear. Its lips were pulled back in a permanent snarl, its eyes wide open, staring up at the ridge from where it had fallen. When they cut it open, they found the stomach empty. It hadn't been eating its victims. It had been killing them for sport. The reign of terror in Chamoli ended that winter. But if you travel to those high ridges today, the old shepherds will tell you that the story didn't end completely. They say that on nights when the wind howls through the ravine, it doesn't sound like wind. It sounds like a heavy, congested breathing. Huff. 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 They say the physical body of the bear died on the rocks, but its rage seeped into the mountain itself. Locals still refuse to cross Bravest drop after sunset. They believe that if you stand on that edge and look down, you won't see the river. You will see a pair of red eyes looking back up at you, waiting for you to slip. Arjun Rana survived, but he never hunted again. He spent the rest of his life in a quiet village in the valley, always sitting with his back to the wall, always listening to the sounds in the dark. Because he knew better than anyone, you can kill the beast, but you can never kill the fear it leaves behind. If this story of the Himalayan phantom froze your blood, hit that like button before the frost sets in. Share this with your friends who love the mountains, warn them what watches from the cliffs. And subscribe to Apex Truth. The world is full of monsters, and we have only just begun to hunt them. I'm your host. Keep your fires bright. Keep your doors locked. And never, ever look down into the dark.